China is a sovereign state located in East Asia with a current population of over 1.35 billion people, labelling it as the most populous country in the world, housing 19.3% of the world's total population. China has been governed by a communist party since 1949, whereby the People's Republic of China was established. The capital of China is Beijing, with a population approximately 20 million people. Surprisingly, Beijing is not the most populated city within China. Over the last 30 years, China has positioned itself as the country with the fastest growing major economy, with growth rates averaging 10% of its GDP. People of Chinese origin who currently reside outside of the country, either for work or study reasons, are currently believed to be totaling over 50 million people, with approximately 0.9 million of those currently residing in Australia. The spread of China's overseas population for around the world can be seen here. China has a land area of 9.7 million square kilometres, and with such a large land area, the climate and geography varies greatly throughout the country. The Yangtze River serves as the border dividing the country into north and south. Due to China's extreme land size and the vast landscapes of the country, there is generally a large climatic variance across different areas of the country. This provides a large variance in the cuisine found across different regions. China is a very mountainous country, and close to 60% of its land is situated higher than 6,500 feet above sea level. The southeastern region of the country experiences high levels of rainfall, with some areas receiving upwards of 65 inches a year. Alternatively, many areas across the northern region of China experience close to no annual rainfall. As a result, the northern region of China grows primarily wheat crops, as they are more suited to the climate and are later used in the making of noodles, pancakes and dumplings. The geography of China greatly affects food availability, food resources, as well as cooking techniques. The lack of availability of resources to assist with fire making means that food must be cooked quickly and efficiently so as not to waste resources. As a result, dicing, slicing, shredding and cubing food prior to cooking has become a unique feature of Chinese cuisine. Food is cooked primarily through methods such as stir-frying, steaming and braising. The Chinese cuisine uses rice as a core ingredient. In comparison to wheat, rice crops can grow 2 to 3 times as much produce in the same area, allowing China to support their large population. Pork, chicken and fish account for the majority of the meat in Chinese cuisine, as they can be raised using little land space or caught in the rivers that divide the country. Beef is very limited, as the economical costs of providing grassland for beef to graze produces limited economical benefit for the country. Along with the lack of grass needed towards beef, the Chinese cuisine also features limited milk and dairy products as a result of limited pastures. In order to overcome this lack of calcium and limited protein sources, the Chinese use soybeans to overcome this issue. Soybeans can also be found in a large range of China's primary seasonings and sauces, including hoisin sauce, soy sauce, and black beans. Climate and region allowing, the Chinese also utilize fresh ginger root, garlic, scallion, and rice wine vinegar to enhance the flavor of their meals. The 3 main religions followed throughout China include Buddhism, Taoism, and Islam, with Buddhism being the most common. A key aspect of Buddhism states that those who involve themselves with this religion follow a complete vegetarian or vegan diet. As a result, the estimated 100 million people who follow Buddhism within China are currently consuming a purely vegetarian diet. Chinese New Year is the most celebrated holiday for Chinese people that live both within China and around the world, and it celebrates the first day of the Chinese calendar. Celebrations often revolve around families and involve dragon dancing, lantern festivals, and food. The foods often associated with Chinese New Year traditionally feature chicken dishes, with vegetarian meals being served the following day for New Year's Day celebrations.
The Chinese view food as much more than simply a meal. Food is considered by many in the culture as one of the rare joys of living. It also holds significance to building relationships within families and promoting harmony within communities. This then translates into the yin-yang principles heavily present within the culture. The idea of balance is seen a lot throughout Chinese culture, and the same goes for the food on their plate. The balancing of yin foods, which have qualities such as boiling, poaching and steaming, and include foods like bean sprouts, carrots and tofu, and yang foods, which have qualities such as roasting, stir-frying, and include foods like beef, chicken and wine, are critical within a meal. In China, there are two main subgroups of food: the basic and essential parts of the dish, which include rice and noodles, which form the basis of any meal, and then the added more luxury items which add taste to a dish, such as meats, vegetables, and fish. This can be linked back to the yin-yang and the ideas of balancing the dish in order to promote harmony. The variety of food throughout China is immense, due to the country's vast climate variance and its low socioeconomic status of its people. This causes people to seek foods throughout the country. This means for Chinese migrants, they might not be able to have access to the same amount of traditional ingredients available to them in Australia as they would in their country of origin. Unsurprisingly, Chinese food culture has spread throughout Australia. Due to a large quantity of Chinese migrants living within the country, Chinatown can be found in all capital cities across Australia, and many Chinese-specific food venues can be seen in food courts and restaurants. These towns allow the Chinese culture to thrive within Australia. This provides many the ability to access foods not regularly available in a commercial Australian supermarket. This being said though, many of the basic and standard basis of a traditional Chinese meal, like noodles or rice, are readily available through commercial supermarkets in Australia. Culturally, the focus of a meal is less on its nutritional value, but more on the textures, colours and aromas of a dish. Freshness of produce is also high on the list of importance for Chinese within their meals, with many Chinese seeking food products from local markets. Chinese food, within a more westernized setting, has been seen to fit more Western taste. This can be seen with the introduction of deep frying foods such as a sweet and sour pork dish. Also, the use of meat as a focal point of the dish in Australian Chinese cuisine is something seen as a luxury in a traditional Chinese meal, as well as the use of meat in many religions in China, such as Buddhism and Muslim. Banning the consumption of some, if not all, meats is very prominent.
Unlike other societies with a dominant agricultural history, Australia has inherited no particular cuisine in the traditional sense. Australia's food history has instead been dynamic, urban and capitalist driven. Australian cuisine generally places an emphasis on proteins such as meat being the focal point of meals, with much lesser emphasis on vegetables and grains. Chinese cuisine, on the other hand, is very contrasting to this, with their core dietary components being starches, grains and vegetables. Traditional Chinese culture sees meat as a valuable and important resource, and thus they tend to use less meat when cooking their meals, focusing more so on rices and vegetables. The original Chinese food in Australia began during the gold rushes, as some Chinese chose to establish a Chinese cook shops offering the mining community traditional Cantonese dishes based on fresh produce, fish, poultry, pork and rice. In Australian society today, Chinese takeaway restaurants are spread out throughout shopping centres and towns, offering traditional dishes such as stir fries, fried rice, dumplings and curries. As a result of the large Chinese immigrant population in Australia, Chinatowns are being constructed in all capital cities. And these Chinatowns are rich with traditional Chinese food, art and markets, which offer some traditional Chinese fruit and vegetables which are unavailable in most mainstream supermarkets. These markets make it possible for Chinese immigrants to maintain their cultural identity and dietary practices while contributing to the multicultural diversity of Australia. With Chinese and Australian cuisine being so different from each other, over many years we have seen the acculturation of traditional Chinese food throughout Australia. Most Chinese takeaway restaurants in Australia contain much larger portions of meat than their traditional counterparts. This change in portion size is a direct result of acculturation due to the westernised palate of Australians, placing meat and proteins as the central focus of meals. In Australia, we have a set of guidelines which aim to improve overall health and well-being by controlling the amounts and types of foods we eat. The Australian Dietary Guidelines contains information about the types of foods, food groups and dietary patterns which aim to promote health and well-being, reduce the risk of dietary-related health conditions, and to also reduce the risk of chronic disease such as type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. The Chinese version of the Australian Dietary Guidelines, the Food Guide Pagoda, is quite similar in a number of ways. The 5 levels of the pagoda contain all the major groups of foods in the Chinese daily diet. The placement and area of each level of the pagoda mainly reflect the position and proportion of each group of food in the daily diet. Both sets of guidelines suggest a focus on diet high in carbohydrate predominant foods such as cereals and beans, followed by fruits and vegetables, meat and poultry, dairy products, and lastly fats and oil, which should be consumed minimally. One small difference between the Australian and Chinese guidelines is that the Chinese guidelines include physical activity on their diagram, while the Australian diagram only includes dietary guidelines. Some health implications have to be considered, such as adjusting portion sizes of particular foods according to the individual's nutritional requirements. Also, there is no recommended sugar intake in the pagoda or the Australian dietary guidelines. However, sugar consumption should be limited due to the risk of causing dental damage. While Chinese and Australian diets differ greatly, their dietary guidelines share a similar goal: to guide healthy eating habits and to improve overall health, well-being and education of the communities.